Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have new victory track meta. Now I already have graduated the victory track, but at the moment the gladiator circuit meta is very similar to victory track, and it basically is just even more potent rich get richer power gain, and also you get a nullify passive for 4 seconds whenever you get power lock passive whenever you nullify opponent's buffs. So the base idea of the meta remains the same. And with that, I will briefly show you my deck and kind of explain what have been my MVP champions as I was ascending the victory track. Now, that is not to say that my deck will not change. It obviously will. It still has tweaking to do and obviously new metas. And as I go further in with the friendlies as well, I will definitely adjust this deck going further. But this is what I basically run for vast majority of the thing. I am kind of thinking of perhaps swapping out Wiccan, even though Wiccan has been quite cool. It's quite interesting at what he can do. And then out of all of these champions, I definitely want to point out champions that have been the most MVPs, so to speak, the champions that function better in this meta than they often or normally would, because at the same time obviously there are champions that are not necessarily as dominant in this meta. Good examples would be Archangel and Human Torch, and both champions inherently do not gain any buffs, and when you're going up against an opponent who will gain their buffs and who will trigger Rich Get Richer, the fights can get very spicy, especially if you use them against Mystic champions, and all of a sudden you might end up starting to eat level 3s, and then all of a sudden champions that you normally wouldn't draft or wouldn't place, knowing that opponent has an Archangel, you can kind of feel safer to draft and to place, and some of those I am going to explain in just a moment. Right, so let's jump to our favorite website in Aunt May, and let's talk about the first champion. And the first champion is Juggernaut. Juggernaut is a menace in Battlegrounds, period. Every single meta, every single season, he has been kind of growing on me more and more, to a point where at the moment I think he's one of the best Battlegrounds attackers, especially in this meta. Like, to explain it, I guess I can show a screenshot. I don't think I have to say or comment much more. 35 seconds Sasquatch kill. I have had a rank 4 Nick Fury kill in 40 seconds with my rank 3 Juggernaut. And there have been sub 30 second kills on some quicker opponents as well. Juggernaut's menace, and it's super easy to play. Basically, get to level 2, get the bonus points if you have 10 unstoppables active, and given the fact that you will be nullifying opponents' buffs, you will be gaining your fury, your unstoppables and whatnot, you will likely be the one gaining power majority of the time, so you can get your level 2s quicker and do more damage even faster. So Juggernaut is like an absolute beast. He really is, and he has been in several metas, but in this meta, he's just a monster. Let's move on to the next one, and next one is, yet again, kind of Mr. Fantastic. I know a lot of people are not overly enthusiastic about Mr. Fantastic. I even have gotten quite recently comments that, why do you rate Mr. Fantastic as highly? Is he better than Quicksilver? Are you even playing this game? And yes, I am playing this game. And I do think he's better than Quicksilver, by the way. And there we go. So in this meta, Mr. Fantastic is great because obviously he has the amazing power control. And also, if you do get to use Mr. Fantastic against Mystic champions that do not gain inherently buffs on their own, let's say against Sasquatch or something against Brintra, when you do manage to trigger the dexterity, you actually gain some extra power yourself, which lets you get your level 2 quicker and lets you be quicker at the ramp up. Therefore, Mr. Fantastic can be faster than he often is in other metas, whilst still keeping 100% control of the fight. Similarly on defense, at times opponents rely on having access to more special attacks and getting there quicker, but champions that have to throw their special attacks and do throw their special attacks frequently do not necessarily always do very well against Mr. Fantastic. So a lot of the champions that opponents will be kind of wanting to run Mr. Fantastic has all the capabilities to delay and procrastinate that fight by reducing the special attack damage, and then obviously evade and whatever else comes in as well. So he's still an menace offensively and defensively, which I absolutely love. Omega Sentinel is one of those champions that enjoys increase in her damage in majority of the fights where I ended up using her, to a point where she finishes fights about 30 to 50% quicker than she normally would. And the reason for that is, again, because she has her natural armor up buff when you use her against champions who do not have natural buffs other than the fury that you may be giving opponents at times. But again, that fury can be kind of like gotten rid of. And when you trigger your dexterity, you can manage to turn that power gain to your benefit, and then she gets to her level 2s quicker, and then the entire fight goes immediately significantly faster. And on top of that, obviously, she also can still be quite decent on defense, depending what kind of counters opponents have. Given the fact that she's immune to nullify, she can take some tricky and interesting matchups in this meta better than in others. I have had some very cool and fast Man-Thing kills, for instance, with Omega Sentinel, and she definitely has been kind of like a step up of her own, let's say, version in different metas. So definitely want to point out Omega Sentinel is a very fantastic champion. Speaking of a step up, it's Nimrod, because we all know that Nimrod's majority of the damage is in the juicy level 2. When you get to that level 2, you know, opponent's health bar will melt. Whether you finish the fight with one level 2 or you need more, it depends on who you go up against and how many armor ups you have, and a few other things. But the point is that level up will hurt and fast. The cool thing about Nimrod obviously is he does have access to plenty of buffs. He does have his armor buffs. You can drop well-timed level 1 even before you're fully ramped up in order to inflict energy vulnerability on opponent and gain your power gain buff yourself. So energize buff yourself and trigger the dexterity, at which point you will gain power like crazy. And likewise, he's much harder to fight against. In this meta, Nimrod is much better defender because he's a champion that gains buffs as the fight progresses, especially on defense when he has access to that fury buff as well. And then when he starts throwing special attacks, most of the time bad things happen. For instance, he gets energized, which means he's going to be having access to even more special attacks. For instance, he goes unstoppable, and if at the point when he goes unstoppable, he still has some other buffs, he will be gaining power through that, and he might be just kind of like looping into special attacks. So Nimrod in this meta without a proper counter is very, very dangerous and scary. Much more dangerous as a defender in this meta than in most others. And then we have Hyperion. And the thing with Hyperion is that in an average meta, when you go up against Hyperion, you can kind of use anyone, and it really depends on AI. Obviously, ideally, you do want to have a counter, but even if you don't have a power control option as a counter for Hyperion, quite often you can get your fights done. In this meta, you can forget about it, because his natural power gain plus his ability power gain means that you're going to be beating level 3s. Simple as that. So Hyperion obviously is still great as an attacker with increased amount of power gain. He can manage spam special attacks back to back basically, and just, you know, heavy attack and then level 1 forever. But as a defender as well, he's much more dangerous, where opponent absolutely 100% has to have a great counter for him. If they don't, they're dead. Or at the very least, they're going to eat multiples of special 3s. So Hyperion has been made much more dangerous in this meta. And CGR has been made much more dangerous as an attacker in this meta. Namely, typically, because when you drop your level 2, you often will have to go for a second level 2 and hope that the fight hasn't lost its momentum, so you can still rely on getting in some damage after that level 2 whilst the armor breaks are active. Well, now with CGR and him being able to nullify the opponent's buffs completely, and then gaining power like crazy himself, because you will have 2 to 3 buffs for vast majority of the fight with him, just means that he's going to be gaining even more power, he's going to be even faster, and CGR is somebody that just absolutely menacingly destroys pretty much everything in this meta. You really do have to factor this guy in every draft now. Previously, CGR was still one of the fastest killers, but you could often outpace CGR based on a matchup or finish fights with like maybe slightly higher health or it wasn't as dramatic. In this meta, CGR is just a bit different beast because of that extra power gain from Rich Get Richer, and basically you finish a level 2 and you already have like an extra bar of power and you do one combo and you can go into another level 2. Then moving on, Gore. Gore again is a champion that just have buffs for days. Now, you can use Gore effectively on offense in this meta as well, given the fact that it's quicker to get to his level 3s. The fact that he has to use his level 3s pretty much verbatim in this meta also unfortunately means that he's not still going to be one of the fastest options. There are definitely champions who can finish out fights faster, but he's a good kind of like option offensively in a pinch situation. But on defense, this man now is a monster. There are far fewer counters that can deal with Gore in this meta than in any other, and that is to do with that increased amount of power gain, with how long his level 1s take, and because of it, you know, if you can't get rid of his power gain, he can basically just throw special attacks back to back at all times. And in this meta, I can even feel safe throwing Gore down against Archangels, for instance. He has destroyed on defense. He has destroyed so many different champions on defense this time around that it's not even funny at this point. He's one of those champions that gets banned in like 4 out of 5 matches that I do have. So initially I could place him on defense for a bit, but then people caught on, and now he's just basically perma-banned for a vast majority of the time. But we have Hulkling, and Hulkling is obviously, again, much more dangerous offensively and defensively. The most annoying thing about Hulkling on defense, obviously, is the fact that he goes indestructible, and if he starts dropping his level 1, he never runs out of shapeshift charges, which means after every combo, he's going to have indestructible protecting him. His special attacks take time, and even if you can use a champion that, you know, does relatively well against him, you are stalled quite a bit. Well, in this meta, it's much more harder because obviously he always has power and he gains power because he has buffs for days. And offensively as well, with that extra power gain, he's just all that more brutal. He's a champion that will frequently finish fights in like 30 to 40 seconds, even against like really tanky champions, because you can just get to your level 2s like it's nothing. In this meta, you also don't even really need to overly focus on whether you get the double furies or not, because you're going to be back to your level 2 within mere seconds, and you're just going to be throwing that. So Hulkling is a menace in this meta. Interestingly enough, Galen doesn't get on this list because the increased power gain can be quite annoying for him sometimes, even slowing him slightly down, because when you start throwing special attacks with Galen, you still build those charges, but the special attacks take a while and they kind of throw you off your rhythm as well. So in my experience, Galen hasn't necessarily been as effective as Hulkling in this meta, but obviously he's still a champion to be reckoned with. And here is another one of the secret tricks that I have bamboozled people with. For instance, Nova is definitely a champion that, you know, traditionally can be taken with Archangel, can be taken with a ton of different champions. But in this meta, it is so much harder, because obviously he can gain that extra fury, but he already has the fury from the very beginning of this fight, and he does gain other buffs throughout the fight, which means Nova with increased power gain is just a menace, because typically it's kind of hard enough to either find openings against Nova and then bait out the special attacks, and if he gets a bit stingy, the fact that he gains power as you keep baiting special attacks can be very dangerous. And now that power gain's kind of increased, so Nova has been putting in work to me against many champions that typically would nuke him down. For instance, Human Torch, for instance, Archangel, and then a whole load of others. Going up against Nova, you definitely do need that buff or power control now, and again, many of the counters that typically work against him don't this time around. So those have been my personal MVPs. I do think that there's one more champion to point out, and that is Longshot. Longshot is, again, significantly better defender in this meta because he has the ability to nullify the opponent's buffs, and you don't really want to gain buffs against Longshot because that would just give him more power via Mystic Dispersion. And because of that, and how he's kind of annoying as is on defense, but if you give him a Fury, he's going to be gaining more power, and then the fight just immediately kind of escalates and becomes a lot more dangerous. So yes, Longshot is another one of those champions that in this meta is still a great, fantastic attacker, because you can fate seal the opponent and prevent them from gaining power, switch off Rich Get Richer, everything's fine. But on defense, again, since he has increased ability accuracy, he's almost immediately going to gain that Fury buff. And if he actually starts working with Rich Get Richer, there's very little that people can do. And if you bring in buff-heavy champions against Longshot, again, the fight typically doesn't go too well, because he has a chance to nullify them, or if those buffs expire by themselves, then they feed Mystic Dispersion and bad things happen. That is to say, there aren't that many great counters for Longshot in this meta, I'd say. That being said, let me know who have been your Victory Track MVPs, and I will catch you guys later. See ya. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about the